Alright guys, so today I wanted to talk about the Rolex Datejust 36. I've had a lot of requests to do some Rolex videos, mostly Submariners, and here's the thing. I've sold almost all of my Rolex watches. In fact, the one that you just saw that we're going to be reviewing today, even though it's a men's watch, it's actually my wife's watch. And that's what really led me to the idea for this video. And the idea really is this. It's the question I have is, the Rolex Datejust 36, is it still relevant as we approach 2020? Is it too small for most men, or is it coming back into vogue, and is there going to be a renaissance with the Datejust 36? Because watch sizes are starting to come back down from when they were massively huge in the late 90s up through the early 2000s to about 2010. Most watchmakers have been scaling back the size of their watches, with maybe the exception of Rolex, who has pushed up some of their watches. For example, the Rolex Explorer 1 has gone from 36 to 39 to modernize it. The Datejust has gone from 36 to now having a second option, the Datejust 41, and that time in there when they also had the Datejust 2, which was also 41. But I wanted to talk about the original and most iconic of the modern Rolex watches, which is the Datejust 36. The Datejust 36 was first introduced in 1945 for Rolex's 40th anniversary. And one of the things about the Rolex Datejust is it is iconic. You can find it in movies. You can, well, in fact, one of the first Datejust was actually made for Winston Churchill in 1945 after VE Day, when the Allies secured victory over the Axis powers in Europe. Another thing about the Datejust 36 is, to me, the Datejust 36 is the quintessential Rolex. When you see somebody wearing a Datejust 36, you immediately know what it is. And I always had it in my mind that the Datejust 36 was, and now I'm getting close to 50 years old, but in my mind it was always an old man's watch. It was always the CEO watch. Maybe along with the Rolex Day-Date President. But my opinion of the watch has changed a lot. I'm looking at the Datejust 36 in a new light, since watch sizes seem to be coming down. They're less ostentatious. And I'm actually thinking about picking up a used Rolex Datejust 36 from probably the mid to late 90s. But let's take a look at this watch, and then we'll come back here to the office and sum up and see what we think. All right, guys, so here we have it. You can see the Rolex Datejust 36 on the right as compared to the Omega Speedmaster Professional Moon watch. And you can see the size difference in the case. And so, you know, one of the things that really got me thinking about this video is the question of whether the Datejust 36 is just too small for most men in this day and age. And I just kind of wanted to give a comparison to see what the size difference looks like there. We'll go over specs a little more here in a minute, but we've got 36 millimeters on the Datejust as compared with 42 on the Speedmaster, and you can get a good idea of how much smaller the Datejust is. So let's get the Speedmaster out of the way, and let's just talk about this watch for a second. So this is actually my wife's watch. She wears this quite a bit, and it's another reason that got me thinking about this video. I do see a lot of women wearing the Datejust 36. You know, when we talk about some of the Rolex watches for women, we're talking about 29 millimeters, 34 millimeters, quite small by today's standards, petite. And I think a lot of women prefer a watch more of this size. I think a lot of times when women go in and they look at watches and they're not watch collectors, or they haven't studied horology, A lot of times they'll go in and pick up a fashion watch, and those fashion watches are almost always 36 to 40 millimeters. I would always advise against buying a fashion watch just because you like the way it looks, because you can probably find a quality mechanical or automatic watch for about the same price if you know where to look, and I think it's a better deal. I mean, that's not to say some people just like the fashion watches, and that's okay, but it's really not a good idea if you're looking to collect, for sure. But anyway, yeah, so we've got the 36 here. I want to talk just a little bit about the history of the 36. So as I said earlier, the Rolex Datejust 36 was first introduced in 1945. It was Rolex's 40th anniversary. And again, as I said, one of the first models went to Winston Churchill. They actually, Rolex, Hans Wilsdorf, emailed. That is a huge slip of the tongue. Hans Wilsdorf actually sent a letter to Winston Churchill asking if they could give him a watch. And of course, Churchill said yes. Rolex put together a nice Datejust for Churchill and sent it over to him. This model here is reference 16200. It is a Rolex caliber 3135. It is a 31 jewel movement and a 48-hour power reserve. Now, the Rolex 3135 movement has been around for decades and is one of the most famous movements Rolex has ever produced, and one of the most robust in terms of longevity and just overall quality. Of course, it is cost certified. It is a chronometer. And with a 48-hour power reserve, that's actually pretty good for a movement that has been around for many decades. The case diameter is 36 millimeters, hence why it is the Rolex Datejust 36. It is 11.7 millimeters thick. And one of the things about it is that it actually, to me, wears thinner than that, wears smaller than that. So I think that's one of the reasons why this watch has been such a staple in dress watches, because it's easy to wear, it's small, fits under a cuff, and works really well in all situations. This particular model that I got for my wife does have the Jubilee dial, and hopefully you can see it there. It does have the holographic Rolex on the dial there. Of course, the diamond markers, those are white gold outlined applied diamond markers. We have the white gold Rolex crown at 12 o'clock, and the typical dial layout of every Rolex. We have the chapter index not on a ring on the rehaut, but it is actually printed onto the dial. And of course, it has the love it or hate it Jubilee bracelet. I am in the hate it camp, not because I don't like the way it looks. It's just, we'll talk more about it in a minute. This one's not so bad. My wife's wrist, as you can see, is really, really small. So there's just not a whole lot of room to get play in this bracelet. In fact, I had to take this bracelet to a Rolex AD and have them cut and shorten the bracelet, because even after taking all the links out, it was still too large for my wife's wrist. This particular Rolex here is from the 1990s. The dial is a genuine Rolex dial, however, it was replaced. This originally had a standard white dial on it, and then of course it did have the Rolex diamond bezel there. The lugs are 20 millimeters, so it's easy to find straps to fit it. So if I ever want to borrow this from my wife and throw it on the wrist, I've got plenty of bands I could throw on there. What I'd probably do is throw a black leather band on there and wear it and see how it looks, although for me, the diamonds might be a bit too much. So let's just talk about the watch in general. Of course, it does have the 2.5 date magnifier there, which again, I think is what is quintessential Rolex. The standard bezel that comes on this watch, of course, is the white gold fluted bezel, which again, I think is quintessential Rolex. This watch with the fluted bezel, I would be much more likely to wear. I don't mind the diamonds on the dial, but for me, being a bigger guy and being in public and talking in public a lot, the diamond bezel's a little bit much for me. Replace that with the white gold fluted, and I have a classic Rolex. Overall, everything about this watch is standard Rolex. The oyster case, high polish. This one has been updated with a sapphire crystal, and it does have a little bit of reveal to it there. So you got to be a little bit careful when you're wearing this thing, just not to really bang that reveal and chip it up a little bit. Again, the polish on the case is nice. It is your standard Rolex plain case back screw in with Rolex's proprietary tooling there to get into it. As I said, it does have the Rolex 31-35-31 jewel movement, which is a great movement. It certainly is a movement that has withstood the test of time. So let's talk about the bracelet real quick. Again, I am not a big fan of Rolex's Jubilee bracelet. Again, because this one is so short, because my wife's wrists are fairly small, it doesn't have a lot of play, but these do tend to stretch out over time, and where you can almost take this and turn it and touch the buckle almost to the case. But of course, the shorter it is, the less likely you're going to have that much stretch in it. It does have the older Rolex clasp that is just stamped out of stainless steel. It's sturdy enough, but nothing to write home about. Certainly, I think Rolex needs to up their game a little bit on their dress watches in terms of things like this. I mean, they've done such a great job with the clasp and the bracelet on their Oyster Sport models. The Submariner has the awesome clasp that you can adjust the size very easily with their quick set there. Also with the Deep Sea Sea Dweller, which I used to have, I loved the way that bracelet sized and it was solid. This is pretty flimsy stamped stainless steel, but then again, it's a petite watch. And it has the Oyster Lock clasp, not the flip lock, because this is quite a bit of an older watch, and you can see the buckle's fairly small, but you can tell it has stood the test of time. The brushing on it still looks really good. We've got the nice sign there for the Rolex crown, and even though it doesn't have the safety clasp like the flip lock cases, it does a good job of holding in there. Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. One thing I do like about this bracelet is it has a ton of adjustability. Again, that would be huge for me because my wrists get bigger and smaller during the seasons and swell quite a bit and then unswell during summer depending on what I'm doing. So that's a nice touch there. Anyway, so yep, that's the bracelet. It's a solid bracelet. It's just I'm not a fan of the Jubilee. I would prefer this watch better with an Oyster bracelet than the Jubilee. But the Jubilee kind of gives it that classic Rolex look also. Oddly enough, I think that the company Strapcode, which makes some awesome bracelets, I think Strapcode makes a Jubilee replacement for this watch that is much better in quality than the older Rolex Jubilees that were shipped on it. So you can grab one of those, throw it on there, and won't have to worry about it feeling so light and stretching so much. So yeah, it is a classic looking Rolex. Of course, it does have the Rolex crown on the Rolex crown. No crown guards. They kept it sleek and dressy for this watch. All in all, it's just a pretty simple Rolex. You can find these used with the white gold fluted bezel and a non-diamond dial. You can find them used, especially this model number 16200, for around $4,000 to $5,000 in really good condition. Some of the older Datejust that go back to the 4-digit models are getting up in price, $10,000, $15,000 used, and that's just because they're becoming collector's items. So anyway, I think this is a really good watch. I think it is a classic watch. I think everything about this watch says Rolex. But my question is this watch too small for most men today? Let me know what you guys think. Let's take it back to the office and finish this video up. All right, guys, so that's my review of the Datejust 36. Let me know what you guys think. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button. If you didn't like the video, leave it a thumbs down and tell me down in the comments why you didn't like the video. I'm always interested in hearing the good and the bad and just people's thoughts in general of the products, the ideas, and also of my videos. So, yeah, I appreciate it. Follow me on Instagram at Sophisticated Neanderthal. Again, hit that subscribe button. I would appreciate it. As always, I appreciate it when everybody stops by and watches my video. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next one.